Doctors change lives every day, but what happens when life changes yours? A single injury, a sudden illness. Your career, your income, your future can shift in an instant. The best physicians don't just plan for success, they protect it. At Set for Life Insurance, they believe financial security isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. True own occupation disability insurance ensures that no matter what happens, your future stays in your hands. Because protecting your income means protecting everything you've built. Visit drpodcastnetwork.co/set4life today. Secure your future before life makes the choice for you. We are no longer physicians, we're providers.
Ask your baby's permission.
Gay people, you have become a product. Should auto insurance cover STD? Are you freaking kidding me? So you demean us. You don't get a parade for a sexual preference. To not hurt the feelings of somebody with a fraction of my training. That a beaver's ass presented this to the world. It's a natural flavor. But you are literally an ice cube in a martini shaker. All right, welcome back to BS Free MD DOCTAILS with cocktails. Look at this. I can even add the secondary logo and the banner. Look at that. I have ultimate control. All right, welcome back. I'm Dr. Tim Hindmarsh. I'm flying solo. May is not joining us today, but that's all right. I am wearing my absolute new bandwagon jumping jersey. Having been here almost 2 years now, I have completely jumped on the Lightning bandwagon, the Tampa Bay Lightning. We were there last night. Spectacular last home game of the regular season. They're going into the playoffs. They're going to be playing the Florida Panthers. So it's Battle of Florida right off the bat, which I'm not really happy about. I wish the NHL went back to its old format where it was 16 teams make the playoff, one plays 16, two plays 15, all the way down. But of course, they don't do that because, you know, they have this North and West division and East and West divisions and whatnot. So it is what it is. But at any rate, so I'm sitting there in the game. I'm happily watching the hockey game, and I'm like, okay, we're living, you know, the spring here has been absolutely spectacular. It hasn't been too humid. It hasn't been too hot. It's been really windy, which is great because now I can actually kiteboard and not kill myself. So it's been sensational. I'm like, this is exactly why I moved. I love this. This is great. And I'm at a hockey game, and it's actually cold in the building to the point where, you know, by about the beginning of the third period, I'm like, I might not have dressed warm enough. And I was like, how is this possible that you can live in this tropical paradise and you can go to an NHL game and we got teams in Southern California, you know, there's the Kings and the Anaheim Ducks. And then, you know, South Florida has two teams. Arizona had a team until they, you know, blew that up. And I was like, how is this possible to play games in these incredibly hot climates? And we, you know, and it's something we take for granted, which is air conditioning. And so I'm sitting there enjoying the game, drinking a Florida Man beer. And I'm like, when did air conditioning become a thing? Because air conditioning has been one of the most disruptive technologies in the history of humanity. When you really think of it, at least in the United States, it has been, because there's so many areas in the United States that are highly densely populated that no one would possibly live there if it wasn't for air conditioning. You would not have 17 million people in the state of Florida without air conditioning. Phoenix, Arizona wouldn't have whatever it has, like 4 million people, 3 million people or whatever, without air conditioning. You know, air conditioning makes living in the desert Southwest and the South of the United States tolerable and actually delightful, because you can always get into an air-conditioned building to the point where you can air condition a 20,000 seat arena and freaking play hockey in it, which is amazing. So was there a time, I was thinking about this, was there a time when there was no air conditioning in the buildings they played hockey in, where they relied on the freezing of the ice? And how that works is they build hollow tubes that act as rebar into the concrete of where the ice surface goes, and then they can super chill the concrete and just pour water on it, and it freezes. And so until recently, they didn't air condition the buildings because, the end of the NHL season was usually the middle of May. They only played in northern cities, so it didn't really matter. And the ice was cold enough that it kept the building cold. Well, that all came crashing to a halt on May 20th, 1975, when the Buffalo Sabres were playing the Philadelphia Flyers. I almost said Phillies, but that's the baseball team, the Flyers. And I believe it was in Buffalo, and it was hot. It gets hot there on the 20th of May. And so what ended up happening is two things in this game. It was an amazing game. I remember it. I was 10 years old, and of course we watch every single hockey game that's on TV growing up in Canada. And what ends up happening is they have a bat flying around the stadium. And it's like flying like down to the ice and like everywhere. And this bat is flying around until they're just ready for a face-off, and it flies right in front of one of the wingers of the Buffalo Sabres, and he just takes a stick and like smacks this thing out of the air and kills it, which I'm sure now PETA would be, freaking out and trying to boycott the NHL and all this kind of stuff. So at any rate, so that happens. And then they're playing the game, and it's getting warmer and warmer and warmer in the building because you got thousands of fans. And this fog, because again, remember, the building is not air conditioned. It just has ice in it. All right. This fog gets to the point where they have to stop the game because there's so much fog, you cannot see the players. It's like, it's like going to a Black Sabbath show in, 1971, right? It's just like all this fog, and they're trying to play hockey. So they get the attendants at the game to skate around with blankets, trying to get the fog out of the building. And they kind of succeed in a way. But you can see videos of this on YouTube, and it's absolutely unbelievable. The fog game. So the fog game happened because of no air conditioning. And so then I was thinking, okay, well, May and I were in Charlotte for our 10th anniversary because my wife is so amazing that she actually consented to going to a NASCAR race for our 10th anniversary. And we went to this Stars on Ice thing that they had in the facility there, a rink, obviously. And again, it was an older building, and the air conditioning system couldn't keep up with the 85 or 90 degree heat and humidity in Charlotte at the end of May. And like the ice just started to turn into like puddles where it was literally dangerous for the skaters. So they had to stop the show. And, I'm sure they're trying to crank up the Freon temperature and whatnot. And then eventually, I can't remember exactly, they finally finished the show, and it was like, kind of this like water skiing by the time it was done. So then I started thinking about, where did air conditioning come from? Because we take all of this stuff for granted. And I guess we should, because, it's been around for way, way longer than I ever thought. So I found this great article, and I'm going to read excerpts from it. Once considered a luxury, this invention is now an essential, allowing us to cool homes, businesses, hospitals, data centers, laboratories, and other buildings vital to our economy and daily lives. In fact, air temperature is so important to us that 48% of all energy consumption in American homes is a result of cooling and heating. Thank you, HVAC. 48% of all energy consumption is HVAC for American homes. Wow, that is a mind blower. So, in the 1840s, okay, figure that one out. Not the 1940s, the 1840s. Physician, see, I knew it, you knew it'd become somewhat medical here. And inventor John Gorey proposed the idea of cooling cities to relieve residents of the evils of high temperatures. Gorey believed that cooling was the key to avoiding diseases like malaria and making patients more comfortable, but his rudimentary system of cooling hospital rooms required ice to be shipped to Florida from frozen lakes and streams. Because, of course, John Gorey, the inventor of air conditioning, was from Florida. Hello. He designed a machine that created ice using a compressor powered by a horse, water, wind-driven sails, or steam, and was granted a patent for it in 1851. The dawn of air conditioning, of building, of literally making artificial ice, because it was an ice-making machine, was before we had gas-powered motors and before we had electric motors. He was literally using wind power, horsepower, water sails, and steam. And if Kamala would have won the election, we'd be using all of those things in the next 5 years. But I digress. Although he was successful in bringing his patented technology to the marketplace, although he was unsuccessful in bringing it to the marketplace, primarily due to the death of his chief financial backer, his invention laid the foundation for modern air conditioning and refrigeration, which is amazing. So then we go to the guy who's the real father of air conditioning, a guy named Willis Carrier. What you talking about, Willis? Who took a job that would result in the invention of the first modern electrical air conditioning unit. Well, working for again, you can't make this up, Buffalo, just like the Buffalo Sabres, the Buffalo Forge Company in 1902, Carrier was tasked with solving not a heat problem. Air conditioning was not produced initially to deal with heat. It was invented to deal with humidity. Or as we like to say in the South, women gauge how humid it is by how much sweat they have under the bottom of their boobs. What we like to call humidity. What is the relative humidity? Just measure the line of sweat and you will know. Because humidity will kill. Okay, so he could either humidify the air by heating water or dehumidify by cooling water. So cooling water and sending it out into the air and sucking the humidity out of the building. They had to do this because he was working for this lithography company, and they were trying to publish books using lithography, and it was so humid in the summer that it would wrinkle the pages, and then you can't, print books. So Carrier, of Carrier air conditioning fame, started by solving a humidity problem in a publishing house, which I find really interesting. So then we move on to 1904. The St. Louis World's Fair. Organizers used mechanical refrigeration to cool the Missouri State Building. The system used 35,000 cubic feet of air per minute to cool the 1,000-seat auditorium. So we're not bending the needle of efficiency yet. And so it cooled a bunch of rooms, and everybody was like, wow, this is amazing. We move on. By 100 years ago, the technology was such that it was just way too cumbersome to use in a home. So let me just kind of scroll back here, and I'm going to find some more interesting stuff. America spends more on healthcare than any other country, yet we rank 48th in life expectancy. We spend trillions, but 200,000 insured people still declare medical bankruptcy every year. Clearly, the system is broken. But what if there was a way to take back control, to break free from inflated costs and red tape? That's exactly why Crowd Health was created, a smarter, more transparent way to pay for healthcare. No middleman, no bureaucracy. Just a community of people helping each other when it matters most. Join the revolution. Go to joincrowdhealth.com and use promo code BSFREE for a discount on your first 3 months, because your health should be in your hands, not theirs. Okay, so in 1929, building off refrigeration technology, Frigidaire introduces a new split system room cooler to the marketplace in 1929. Think of that. That's 100 years old. You could cool rooms 100 years ago. In 1931, we get the first window unit. Remember those, you drive by apartments and they all have these window units sticking out of them. That started in 1931. Again, pretty expensive, didn't sell a lot, didn't quite hit that marketing sweet spot where the convenience and the cost kind of makes sense for people to use. By 1947, inexpensive window air conditioners came out by several manufacturers. By 1947, 43,000 units were sold in the United States. So this is really, when you really think of it, the dawn of air conditioning was in like the 1840s, like the whole concept of being able to make artificial ice, but it never really became a marketable thing for 100 years. It took 100 years of development before you got window air conditioners that people would actually buy and use. So that is fascinating. But it took, if you really start fast forwarding, it took the development of super efficient refrigerants, which was in the late 70s, past the fog game, before we got really efficient air conditioning that, you could, cool a 20,000 person stadium and not even think about it. The air conditioning unit we have a garage, a separate a commercial building that we bought, and it's 24 feet by 50 feet by 22 feet. And I don't have a lot of stuff in there right now, but you can cool that entire building when it's 95 degrees here and 80% humidity. You can cool that down easily to 70 degrees with one small air conditioning unit. Like, it's amazing. It's basically like those in-wall units where you have a little condenser or whatever outside, and then the in the wall thing. Like, it's unbelievable how efficient this technology is. It begs a lot of other questions, because when you think, okay, were people really supposed to live in the swamp of Florida or the deserts of Arizona in gigantic numbers? And the answer is probably not, but we do because we love it, because we love the sun. But then it brings all these other issues, right? Like, for instance, in Phoenix, you got tons of lawns. You have tons and tons of golf courses. You're irrigating the desert. What does irrigating the desert do to an environment? It increases the humidity. It increases the total heat burden. Is that a good thing? I don't know. If you ask Greta Thunberg, she'd probably say it's probably not a good thing. What do we do when you have 17 million people in Florida and they all want to enjoy golfing and sitting outside? You have to kill a lot of bugs. Is killing a lot of bugs a good thing? I don't know. So, there's all of these trade-offs that we don't really know about, that we sort of take for granted. Like, I take for granted not getting eaten alive by mosquitoes when where I live was a reclaimed swamp, because the entire state is a reclaimed swamp. And so, it kind of makes you, have these different questions up, down, second and third order effects that nobody can predict, because of course nobody can predict second and third order effects until you put the first order effect into gear, assuming you know the result, but we don't ever know the result. And so air conditioning, I've always wanted to do a show on air conditioning. Maybe I'm just a complete geek, but I find it fascinating because this one piece of technology totally altered the landscape of the United States. If there was no air conditioning, people don't live in the desert Southwest. If there's no air conditioning, there's way, way less people that live in the southern United States. I mean, there's way less productivity in the summer in the entire country, because you really need to be comfortable to work in a factory. I mean, imagine what it was like working in a steel mill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the middle of the summer when it's 95 degrees outside, and you're pounding steel, or you're building cars in Detroit. I mean, Detroit gets hot as hell in the summertime. And so it isn't just comfort. It changed lots of things. And we forget this. We forget this as human beings. We forget second and third order effects. And I think no business, no enterprise has been worse at this than healthcare. We assume because of biology, because biology is something that you only know so much about. And it takes years and years to try to figure out what the effects are. We have so many drugs that we wrote literally hundreds of millions of prescriptions for that almost are never prescribed now because it took hundreds of millions of prescriptions to realize what they actually did. It's called second and third order effects. And we forget those to our peril. I mean, this goes through everything that we do. Like, we used to get, when penicillin came out, we gave it to damn near everybody with a cold. Like this concept of bacteriology versus virology, we never thought of that. We never thought of a gut microbiome. We never thought about bugs being good. It was bugs are bad because, that's what germ theory says. And yes, if you have an infection, bugs are bad. Antibiotics good. Therefore, more antibiotics is better. Well, until it wasn't. Now we're emerging into this world where we're starting to question, at the highest levels, well, what about vaccines? Well, what about them? You have to be able to ask those questions. What are the second and third order effects? I don't know. It hasn't been studied. It all comes back to this, and I wrote about this in a Substack, a week or so ago, which is it all comes back to humility, especially in biology. It's one thing if you're an engineer and you build a bridge, you can pretty much control every variable, but bridges still collapse. But, I had a medical student who was an engineer. And he said one of his favorite professors used to say that metals are truth because you can heat them and you know what they're going to do. You can bend them, when they're going to break. We don't have that kind of knowledge with biology, but we act like biology is the same as engineering. And as an extension of that medicine is the same as engineering, or that medicine is the same, as economics, which is also something that is kind of a black art that nobody really has a great understanding of because it's based on human behavior. And human behavior is by nature unpredictable. So markets are by definition unpredictable. And so I really hope that we get a dose of humility because I think that's going to change, how we go forward. And again, on Team Medical Freedom, we have a problem with, again, if you're abandoning allopathic medicine because of what happened over the last 5 years, and you're like, I don't trust doctors, I don't trust the CDC, I don't trust the FDA, that's fine. But the solution to that distrust is not to throw the baby out with the bathwater and completely, unplug yourself from allopathic medicine, because there'll come a day where you have a broken bone or a heart attack or something, and you need the power of what allopathic medicine does amazingly well, which is acute and emergent care. So I get nervous. Everyone just needs to take a deep breath. If you're trading a handful of pills for a handful of supplements, what is that? Have you made a good trade? Or have you just traded one form of BS for another form? And that's really the question. And so, as we go through the Maha thing and as we ask questions, my concern and my hope is that it's just based on real science and real data and real questioning, and not just now, but also what's gone on in the past that we can look back at and constructing studies and really good follow-up measures for what goes forward. Because I've done this long enough where I can't believe how many things that I used to do have fallen out of favor just in my 33 years of medical practice. Well, we don't do that anymore because it's dangerous. Or we used to think it's dangerous and we don't think it's that dangerous anymore. I mean, the classic is VBACs in pregnancy. So a VBAC is a vaginal birth after a cesarean section. So when, it would have been, the 60s, 70s in there. If a woman had one C-section, she had 5 kids, she had 4 more C-sections. You never, ever thought of doing a vaginal birth after a cesarean section because the downside risk is you have an increased risk of a uterine rupture. And if you rupture a uterus, it's catastrophic. Ruptured uterus will almost always kill the mother and the baby because it's a catastrophic unleashing of bleeding that neither the mother or the child can survive. And then that all changed. And by the 90s, it was like, no, everyone should be able to have a vaginal delivery. And, the VBAC data is really good. And if you do you're not doing the classical incision, you're doing the lower called phaneal incision down by the pubic bone. That's thought to be far more, robust, until we did that for a bunch of years. And then we started having uterine ruptures because it wasn't as good as we thought it was. So again, humility is the cure to that problem. And so we went back to, women still have vaginal deliveries after cesarean section, but the rules have completely changed. By the time I was done doing obstetrics in the mid 2000s, we had almost abandoned that. And honestly, we're going to interview an obstetrician very soon. And I want to talk to him about that because of how the shifting sands in biology, things that we take for absolute aren't absolute anymore. And again, it's a dose of humility. So anyways, back to my new obsession, the Lightning. Drinking from a Lightning cup. What am I drinking? I'm drinking I got to think of this, exactly what it's called. It's from our friends down the street, literally 1.9 miles, if anyone's asking. The Loaded Cannon Distillery, their port wine finished rum. I'm not much of a rum drinker, but this one I like. It's not too sweet. It's almost got kind of a whiskey. You could call it risky. Combination of rum and whiskey. What else could you call that? Rumski. It's kind of more of a Rumski vibe, which I really like. If you are in the Lakewood Ranch area, try it out. It is totally worth it. If you're into rum and whiskey, this is kind of the Reese's Peanut Butter Cup of that world. I'm not a big peanut butter cup fan, but it's a good analogy, I think. So cheers. Here's to the Lightning winning the Stanley Cup this year. And because I really, really want to go to a Stanley Cup parade. Our son went when Vegas won because he was living in about 3 hours away when he was going to school. And he said it was pretty awesome. And I'm thinking, hey, Vegas, Stanley Cup parade down the strip, that one would be really hard to beat. But apparently they parade down the Tampa River in a boat parade. Like when the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl the last time, and Tom Brady almost threw the Super Bowl trophy into the Tampa River. That was pretty cool. But anyways, so that's it for this week. Remember, stay BS free. Please listen. Please share our episodes. Rate us 5 stars, even if you think we suck. That's okay. Share us with your friends. If you hate us, then share us with your enemies. It's okay. I don't care. Just share away, please. And we have some great guests. This week we have an interesting guest. So depending on when you're listening to this or if you're watching it, this would be, I got to use my head, 17th of April episode. Pete Evans, who is a famous celebrity chef from Australia, talks about healthy diet, enjoying food, and enjoying life. It's a great episode. Encourage you to listen to that. And as always, keep it BS free, keep asking questions, and keep having fun.